Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Algonquin Highlands is located on Treaty 20 Michi-Saugig territory and in the traditional territory of the Michi-Saugig and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations. We also acknowledge a historical shared presence of other Indigenous nations throughout the area. We recognize these original inhabitants as the stewards of its lands and waters since time immemorial. Could I have a mover and a seconder to approve the agenda today, please? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved that the April 6th, 2023 meeting agenda be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof today? Hearing none. The only remarks I'd like to make is that I attended yesterday the housing forum that was put on by primarily Places for People. Councillor Richards was with me, and it was a very informative session looking at all aspects of housing. I think there was some good food for thought for us all, and I look forward to us having a conversation about what we can do about housing in Algonquin Highlands. Okay, moving on. Could I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the minutes of March 16th? Councillor Shortreed and Barry.
By Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved the March 16th, 2023 regular council meeting minutes be approved as circulated.
All in favor? That's carried. We have no public meetings today. Moving into delegations, we do have a delegation. You're Mr. Keene to talk to us about the snowmobile staging area. So if you'd like to take the seat, the hot seat.
Oh, good morning, Madam Mayor and members of council. My name is Glenn Keene. I'm a resident of Algonquin Highlands, and I live on Huron Landing Road. And I am speaking to you today on behalf of some of the other residents, of myself and some of the other residents on Huron Landing Road. And I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today. We have concerns related to the additional excessive noise from snowmobiles and people, which for the most part occurs on weekends and is especially loud when multiple trail users arrive in the area, which is usually early in the morning, and then proceed to offload their snowmobiles and let them idle while preparations are being made and trailers secured prior to leaving the staging area to enter the trail. This is again repeated at the end of the day when trail users return to the parking area, and as myself and other residents of Huron Landing Road have witnessed on more than one occasion, and we all agree that the associated noise during the load offload cycle can be extremely loud and has impacted the enjoyment of our properties and the surrounding area. And given the short period of time that the parking area has been in use in February and March of this year, we can only imagine what next winter will bring when the area becomes more well-known and is likely to bring far more users over a longer period of time. We also wish to express to council members that we are confident that you are already aware that the residents of Huron Landing Road and the surrounding area as well have to put up with the constant and excessive noise that is emitted from the aggregate crushing operation on North Shore Road, and also the periodic blasting that occurs there. And you're aware that the elevated noise level associated with those activities is usually at its peak during the winter months. To go along with this, we have the winter maintenance equipment operating at all hours of the day from early fall to late spring. And our only relative peace and quiet that we can hope for are on weekends and during the holidays and Family Day in February, especially. And I can assure council members here today, this is no longer the case since the HCSA parking area has come into use in February. We have very little in the way of peace and quiet on the road. We also have concerns related to the added traffic volumes on Huron Landing Road. I make note of the staff report to council from Chris Card, which is dated February 2nd, 2023, in which, and in the points to be considered section, he makes mention that, quote unquote, the location can adequately hold up to 12 plus vehicles and trailers. The report fails to take into consideration, as it probably should have, that the many trail users who have or will drive onto Huron Landing Road in the future, and some with large trailers and vehicles and trailers that have multiple snowmobiles on them. And after finding the parking space full and no other parking available, and subsequently finding out that the cul-de-sac does not have a radius that would allow them to turn around, they're then forced to back up to the pit entrance, or better yet, if they cannot turn around in one of my neighbor's driveways, which has happened, and given that my own property is directly across the road from the parking area, and mine being the only property on Huron Landing Road with 2 plowed entrances, and where you can actually drive a large vehicle or trailer onto my property and then drive it back out onto Huron Landing Road in order to get to Highway 35. And I can also assure council that my driveway has been used for this purpose on several occasions and without my approval. And for the record, this type of unwanted entry onto my property has never occurred prior to council's approval of the parking area in February 2nd, 2023. I will add one more point to this one, is that many residents of our road has expressed to me their concerns related to the added traffic volume, and especially the disruption on the weekends and holidays. Another point that I wish to make to council to consider is, now that you have granted this HCSA request to have allocated taxpayers' money to maintain their parking area on Huron Landing Road, is how can council then refuse another future request for access to parking from other groups? Let's use, for example, a biker club meeting spot in the summer months, or a kayak group, or perhaps even a river tubing business that would like to use the parking area for staging and access to the beach river in the warmer months. How can we say yes to one group and say no to another? We have concerns that this decision by council to allow long-term parking on our road has potential to negatively affect our property value. And over the past several weeks, I've spoken with many times with the residents that I represent here today. And all of us have concerns as to our resale values being affected by the parking area. And each of us would have had serious reservations about living across the road from a parking lot when we moved to Huron Landing Road. And in my own case, I would not have purchased my property had I known this was something that the town of Algonquin Highlands would even consider, and would suggest to council that most potential buyers will balk at paying the property taxes we do on Huron Landing Road and live beside a parking lot. We also have serious concerns as it relates to potential security issues related to the increased number of non-residents accessing the road. Some of us have properties that have buildings that are set back toward the road, and feel that with the social media exposure that HCSA and the town of Algonquin Highlands has given to the road as it relates to a parking area, this can potentially be seen by non-residents as an area of convenience, and that they can use the area to park year round for all sorts of other reasons, some of which may not be well intended. And with this potential influx of people to our properties could very well become a target of opportunity for theft, damages, and trespassing. And it will also reduce our ability, the residents and the taxpayers on the roads' ability to enjoy our properties and the peace of mind that should come along with living there without having to worry about who is parked across the road and what they are doing there. We, the residents, are also concerned about using taxpayers' money to accommodate parking area, to accommodate parking area and giving the challenging times and the rising property taxes here in Algonquin Highlands. We feel that the money allocated to this can be better used elsewhere as it provides no tax benefits to the residents of the road. And to this point, we are offended that council would actually agree to fund this request and do so without any prior notice to the residents of Heron Landing Road. And that we only found out after the decision was made and a letter was addressed to the residents and not to anybody in particular. To conclude this presentation, we respectfully ask council to take into consideration the point that I have made here today on behalf of myself and the residents I represent, and that you rescind your February 2nd decision to allow the parking area on Huron Landing Road, and that you notify the HCSA that the residents of Huron Landing Road are opposed to a staging area on our road, and we ask that this be done without delay. On behalf of myself and the residents of Huron Landing Road, I thank you very much for your time here today.
Well, I thank you for your comments. And some of your points are extremely well taken, particularly the unauthorized access to your property and concerns about security. I would like to say that at this point, we have only agreed to a trial period. There's been nothing determined about any long-term use there. You know, we wanted to see what how this turned out, you know, basically, and I can see that there's definitely a downside to some of the residents. We have not, and I don't believe we would consider any other use at this time. So I'd like to, just sort of alleviate your concerns with respect to that. I think we're going to have to take your comments into consideration and have some discussion, both with staff and with the Snowmobile Association. But I would ask if any members of council have questions or comments of Mr. Keene. And I note that your name is Glenn, not Greg, as noted on our agenda. So our apologies for that. Comments or questions? So we will definitely take your delegation and your comments and concerns into consideration. And I'm sure you'll be hearing further about this matter.
I thank you very much. I wish everybody good luck with the remainder of your meeting. I'll take my leave.
Thanks. Well
Have a nice
presented.
day.
So the next item. Oh, my apologies. Could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, seconded by Councillor Shortreed. Be it resolved that council receives for information a delegation from Mr. Greg Keene on behalf of the residents of Heron Landing Road, requesting council's consideration to rescind its decision to allow a staging area for snowmobile parking on Heron Landing Road across from their properties.
All in favor? That's carried. Okay, next on the agenda is the under building and bylaw enforcement is the revised clean and clear bylaw. Good morning.
Sorry about that. Just trying to get myself situated here. So good morning. In front of you would be the revised red line draft that has been put forth for consideration. At this point, there was some definitions that we felt needed some tweaking and some clarification to help, especially with the idea of lawns and grass, to try and put in a definition for turf grass to I guess help clarify the concerns with the areas that we have in this township, from rural areas, vacant lots, to manicured lawns, to forested areas. As well with that, we did work in some changes and some exemptions to make sure that we are clear on the ponding of water, and that only would be reflected on properties that perhaps have been altered. Not undisturbed vacant lands. We try to make that clear. So at this point, provided everyone's had an opportunity to review, I would be more than happy to answer any questions, comments, concerns.
I've got a number of points myself, but I believe members of council may have some comments or concerns, so. Questions, comments, concerns? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Thanks very much. First point, I only have a couple. The first one I'd like to ask you and the rest of council about is with regards to composting. There are some methods for appropriate composting listed in the bylaw, which I appreciate because it's about keeping things neat and tidy. And as we discussed at the last meeting, giving you the ability to find and use teeth where necessary to get something done if it has to be done. So I do appreciate the intent. In further reflection since that meeting, I thought about a lot of gardeners that I know and others who really do understand how to compost well and effectively and avoid the unintended or undesirable odors or pests or whatever that we're trying to avoid. And should someone complain about their composting system, it would be in violation of what we've written in the bylaw because they're open heaps, but they're well-maintained open heaps. So I just wonder, is there scope to, or what would be the advantage, disadvantage to refer to the outcomes of composting without dictating this specific means, just to offer that flexibility to those who know how to do the job really, really well?
I would ask before you respond, how, when in your estimation, when you say that they know how to keep I mean, I encourage composting. I just got a note about that myself. But when you say they understand and know how to maintain a compost heap, how would that differ from what's been included in the bylaw?
In the bylaw, there are a couple of points, such as the compost should be contained and preferably with some kind of cover. And it isn't always a physical cover like we have at our landfills. I know that you've also suggested soil cover or other forms of waste that they keep the foodstuffs underneath. But I think even in the section under yard waste, the yard waste is also supposed to be in a container, and that I don't think is necessarily required in order to avoid pests and other concerns.
Go ahead, Angie.
I just want to, I know Kristen has spoken to Melissa, but I spoke to Melissa as well and had a very similar conversation around including outcomes. What the intent of the bylaw is, what is the outcome. So we don't want odor on properties. And so if council wishes, we could eliminate some of the very specific things. So for example, council could say in the bylaw that the intent is to avoid odors on properties. That doesn't mean that the compost has to be covered to avoid the odor. If it's being done properly, exactly, Deputy Mayor, is that it can be done properly without being covered, and specifically covered. We specifically say yard waste, soil, or compost. It could be covered with something else if someone wanted to, or be uncovered, as long as there is no odor. The other thing is that compost can include. Some people do it very well by including, and I learned this all from Melissa. With the meat and the dairy and those types of things, it can be done without odor if it's done properly. So perhaps if we eliminate C for sure, if council wants to go in that direction, and taking out the very specific wording around covering the compost, that may achieve what council's looking for, and I think would still provide the teeth that Kristen needs in the book.
Yeah, I agree. And doing some research as well, as you mentioned about the backyard composting, it does talk about a ratio of greens and browns and proper coverage. So, I mean, I think realistically, probably wouldn't be attending any properties that have proper composting procedures taking place. And more specifically, it does mention that things like meat, dairy, those type of things aren't necessarily recommended in backyard composting. And those are on many different sites. So again, not reinventing the wheel, sort of pulling from other clean and clear bylaws, working on what we had online for research material. But again, completely up to council's discretion on how we want to go about this. Just bear in mind that the other thing too is we're coming into spring and it's bear season, and we all know that any type of food scraps potentially can attract bears. So again, that is specifically something that's on the Bearwise site, to not put those type of materials out and in your composting. So again, we're just trying to, eliminate all potential options of problems or complaints coming in. So definitely different here than backyard composting, say in an urban setting in a city. But certainly we can take those out if that's council's direction. That's sort of where my mindset was going, just to help clarify of how this was drafted.
Councillor Berry.
Just clarification, would you say that the main intent of this bylaw is for like environment and safety reasons?
I would think so, yes. Based off the municipal act, that's the direction that we're allowed to, the council's allowed to create bylaws for, and it's always safety first, as well as protect the environment and protect property. So that is how this is sort of, drafted for a safe, clean and clear environment.
I wonder, as our environment committee hasn't been set up yet, if there's an opportunity for the environment committee to, when it's set up, to look at this before passing it. Given one of the reason is one of the things is that in the previous committee was discussion on composting, on bears, on that type of thing, and general sort of philosophical ways of.
I take your point. But we don't have an environment committee, and we are coming into a season where we want to be able to start to deal with some of these issues. So I guess, it depends on, where we're at with speaking to members of potential members to the environment committee and getting it in place. Angie?
If I may, it's, Melissa, our staff member, is very well versed in this. So I don't know if there would be, and I could be wrong on this, but if there would be more that the committee would be able to offer that she wouldn't already know.
Or that we don't have here,
Yeah.
right here and now. Go ahead.
Further to that, in some of this language, some of the things that have brought attention to when I'm reading this is things about refuse and waste and that type of thing. Like, there are environmental things. And I do think that, I remember when the environment committee initially started, one of the things that we wanted to do was, engage in the Fix It Cafe and the Repair Cafe. And I feel like some of the things that are in here are obstructing repair. I feel that there's.
I guess it depends on how those things are stored. I mean, there's nothing saying that you can't repair things or have things on your property, in anticipation of repairing them or saving them for an event like that. But how are they stored or kept on the property? I mean, and what quantity of things are stored and kept? I guess I would look for, first of all, we were on composting, but you're speaking in general about the bylaw. I guess I would look to other members of council to say, I mean, we've been waiting for this for a long time. We are coming into the season. Do we want to wait for an environment committee to be put in place to hear recommendations coming from Kristen and Melissa that are, to the most knowledgeable people about about the environment and about waste management, that would you see there being substantial changes? Councillor Richards.
Perhaps we could maybe move forward. If not today, we may want a few more changes with the bylaw, but as far as the environment committee goes, they could be reviewing it with Kristen and Melissa as it goes to make sure that it's doing what we want it to do, and give us any recommendations in the future to make changes as necessary.
Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Yeah, I had the same thought that
as we'll see a little bit later on, hopefully there will be a bit more of a policy focus on the Environment Committee moving ahead, if council so agrees, in which case this would become a natural part of the kind of thing that we'd be thinking about. So there would be no reason to not pass it today and then keep an open mind as we learn.
Back to composting. I definitely, we encourage, and I see us encouraging composting and done properly. I'm not sure that I didn't read under the composting section that it needs to be in a container. But personally, I think it should be covered because that does, maybe I don't understand enough about composting. I don't understand how you can, have composting and use it extensively without there being odor and drawing animals to the site. I really don't, there's all kinds of natural material that can be used for cover. So the only comment that I had to make was that we want to encourage in any way we can, and maybe that's another role that the Environment Committee can take is more encouragement, more information, because we can pass this bylaw. It doesn't mean that people are going to read it, follow it. There's lots of follow-up work that can be done. Councillor Barry, you mentioned waste, refuse, kind of going, I don't see the difference between the two. That to me, that's just semantics. Now you can correct me if I'm wrong. If there is a specific difference, I see you've gone through the bylaw and changed it from waste to refuse. And I'm not clear on, the defining line between the two.
So to help clarify that for you, Mayor, so basically in the Municipal Act, it actually defined that council's allowed to create the bylaw using the term refuse. So my oversight the last time was I used the word waste. It's just a technicality. Basically under that description, waste, refuse, basically we're at the end of life, decaying, showing signs of wear. There's a lot of words inside there to help garner where we go with it. Again, we're not going in and going to take anything off anyone's property that has a potential or has a vested use. We're speaking of the bylaws in place for those properties that say are, just completely non-compliant at the end, that things are strewn all over the place. There's a 17-foot quote unquote compost pile that everything and anything is sitting in. There's odors. We're dealing with the very end stage, and that's where the bylaw comes into play. Sort of keep going, just to mention, I don't believe ever that just because a neighbor would see a compost pile on a neighboring property, they would have the means to complain. And sure, if they did, we would go and investigate. But again, if it's being dealt with properly and there's no violations, as far as we're not going to restrict people from composting. It's simply put in here because that's sort of the new, I don't want to say new, but it's being brought back. We're very conscious about that. We're very conscious about the environment and bringing things, back from the day's age of everybody had composting, and then it sort of went away, and now we're back to let's do this. The bylaw is basically put in place. So let's do this correctly, so it doesn't affect anybody and works well for yourself.
Councillor Barry.
I appreciate the clarity on that. Is there a way that in the bylaw, it can state that what you're saying is that the intent of this bylaw is for multiple infractions opposed to one infraction that needs to be addressed, so that it is a case of things are strewn across, that there's more than one infraction, that you're not coming into this, we're not enacting this bylaw for one infraction of a compost, or that there has to be a multiple.
I think that's a difficult road to go down. I really do, because it might be one really big infraction, and if it's just composting and it's really distasteful to your neighbor for one reason or another, I mean, that in itself is a single infraction. And I mean, it could be, I can think of a number of properties that they're just one huge infraction. I mean, it's just a property that is just absolutely covered with junk of all sorts, and that's a single infraction, really. I mean, I guess if you looked at it, there could be all kinds of details in that one property, but I think that that's a tough there is a certain amount of discretion that I understand is a concern here. And that, that we would look to Kristen to use that discretion when enforcing the bylaw. And I think that's a little bit of our struggle here, that there is discretion. And there are certain, degrees of enforcement that can be followed. And, Kristen has talked to that. About talking to people, but, as opposed to writing them up right away. Go ahead, Councillor Berry.
How can we ensure that the complaint process confirms legitimate concerns versus like vengeful property disputes? Like, I don't like the way you're composting. This is a clean and clear violation, but in fact, maybe it's not. Like, how does the complaint process work that way? That it's not property
Well,
disputes?
that's where we have skilled staff to be able to weed their way through it. To discern what the problem is, where the complaint came from, and look at the situation and determine is it just a somebody who's being vengeful, or is it a serious problem? And that's what we've got staffed to look at. Go ahead.
Through you, Mayor. That is something that we deal with quite often in bylaw enforcement. 9 times out of 10, there are some neighbor issues, and neighbor complaints have escalated to the point where we are being dragged in for that purpose. Frivolous and vexatious complaints are common. And again, we follow the regimen of how we investigate. And if there is no violation, there is no violation. Now, whether they like the outcome or not, they're advised to proceed civilly. It's a civil matter between neighbors, and they can get a solicitor, recommendations on how they want to move forward. But bylaw will step away. We will not go back in. We will not be used for that purpose. That is all I can provide to you, that we do have to investigate it upon written complaint, however. But if we get there and there's absolutely nothing, it will be closed. We will walk away, and they will be told that.
Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely hear what you're saying, and it's something that's been not keeping me up at night, but it's something that kind of rattles around in your brain. My only thought would be, this is why we've got the Supreme Court of Canada, is because there are certain types of interpretation that are so subjective they can't be codified. So we've got these, not that anything here would ever get to the Supreme Court, but at every layer of our legal life, there are problems in interpreting what the law says. And I don't think we're ever going to find words to get ourselves out of that situation when it's really at every level. We just have to depend on the discretion of our talented staff.
I would like us to go through the bylaw and talk about specific issues that we've got with it, because I know I've got a number of items here that I wanted to ask about. And we can then come back to, the general application, if you would. So I'm looking for comments on any specific. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
We did touch upon this last time, but I'd like to bring it back just one more time, and that is section 4.3.1B, which is naturalized areas. B says the naturalized area is actively being managed so as not to be left in a state that presents an unkempt or unsightly appearance. My only fear there, my continuing fear, is naturalized areas very often look unkempt, especially if they're in that succession phase where perhaps someone is trying to take what used to be a manicured lot and turn it back into forest. And there will be a good 10 years when it's going to look terrible before it actually gets there. And I'm just fearful that we might not be able to allow for what is a legitimate desire to renaturalize a space.
So if I may, through you, Mayor, I was trying to go through that. I know this is a topic that's come up in not only this municipality, but many. So we've done some research and I totally understand your perspective. And that is going to be a hard line to follow at certain times, because there is a transition between when the natural regeneration happens with deliberate planting. So again, it's a combination of both. So there will be a time frame when it might look unsightly. Again, I know that it's concerning to council, but there will be some discretion where we attend. So, I mean, if they can prove that they've planted some native species, some grasses. They're trimming the edges to ensure that it doesn't encroach onto the roadways or neighboring lots. They planted some wildflower seedlings. They're taking an active role in changing that platform. So long as it takes the time it takes, and they're actively working towards it, I would think that would meet the definition and we wouldn't have a violation. Again, flipping the other hat would be, we approach property and they just say, no, I'm just not cutting it, I'm letting it go. Whatever's happened is going to happen. Well, that actually is not the definition of naturalization. That's in many documents. It's on many different Ontario pieces of documents online and all over Canada, to be honest. Naturalization is coming back, but it certainly is not just washing your hands of it and saying, I'm not cutting, I'm not doing anything. There has to be some maintenance. You'll note that forestry itself, if the forest was to be left alone, it would sort of overgrow on its own. And that's why there are forestry officers, and they do cut and trim and limb and take down certain trees to help the forest sustain itself. So again, that is happening in the world. So whether that happens in a forested area or is happening in someone's yard, there is some type of human interaction that's happening. Now, maybe it's not granted every day cutting the grass right down with the lawnmower or weeding, but there is some maintenance in there. Again, very, very hard at this point for me from what I can gather, to put the right verbiage in there. I think it is going to be up to interpretation a little bit. I think there is a little bit of gray, but we're not the only ones. This council is not the only council having to face this. And there have been some challenges that have seen court because of this type of uncertainty. So again, neighbor's perspective. One neighbor thinks it's absolutely terrible and it's just, awful looking, degrading their property values. However, they're actually maintaining it. They're actually naturally allowing the property to come back. That would be okay. It's those conversations. I mean, every case is different. Every person is different. Every property is not cookie cutter, especially in this area. It's not every fence and little front yard and small rear yard. Like, we have vast amounts of property, whether it's shoreline, forested, vacant, residential, and people have the opportunity and have the right to maintain their property to a certain degree of what perspective they feel. So if they don't want a completely golf course manicured lawn, they don't have to have that. But we have to find the happy medium to be able to deal with the people that just say, yeah, not dealing with it.
You mentioned shoreline, and we've exempted ourselves. And yet I recently got an email from someone who has quoted several pieces of property that belong to the municipality that people are using as a place to dump things. So, I'm wondering what your thoughts are on, I mean, we can't allow that to happen. And by saying that we're exempt does allow it to happen. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on how that might be handled.
Sorry, Mayor, could I ask for clarification? When you say dumping, are we talking like aggregate, like?
No, I'm like, it sounded like junk. And quite honestly, I can't tell you precisely what property or precisely what's there, just that I got a complaint from someone who's, legitimately keeps an eye on their neighborhood. And he's saying that there's a couple of properties that belong to us where people are putting materials, dumping, not granular material. I'm sounds like trash.
Okay.
Refuse.
Refuse.
And that we need to be responsible for that, somehow follow up on it, that we can't allow that to happen. And I'm just wondering how, given the wording of the bylaw, we're going to deal with that.
Okay, I would right away, the first thing in my head is, that's trespassing and that's illegal dumping. So we do have two recourses that we could go. Again, it's trying to prove whose refuse it is, who did it, who's the offender. The only thing I can think of is after the investigation happens, if there's no way to pinpoint anyone, we can report to OPP to keep an eye if they're doing drive-bys. We can tidy up perhaps through a combination of public works and staff, I guess, to get it remedied and to keep an eye on it ourselves. I just don't like, we're not trying to keep our properties like that, and we're not advocating for anybody to dump anything on our property. That's completely illegal.
But I hear if something is reported by someone that there's an activity
We will
taking
act.
place, we've got a method of following up.
For sure.
We're not exempt. Go ahead.
Yeah, and the exemption would be for the township. So because again, going back to the first conversation is, it's difficult to enforce on ourselves, but certainly if someone else is doing that on our property, we can act on.
But I would hope on all our property that we'd be good
Well, that's
stewards.
exactly right. We are in control of that. So if that's the direction of council, for sure, we wouldn't be doing that.
Under section 2.2, the last comment, refuse is defined in this bylaw does not cease to become refuse by reason that it may be commercially saleable or recyclable. And there's also another section, I think under 4.2, that talks about outdoor storage. That about items that may be used for home occupation. And it sounds like you're not allowed to store material. Like I just think I think we talked about it our last meeting, that there are a variety of artists in this community who do different types of and have different interpretations of art. That if they have materials that they're going to use, I think that Councillor Barry used the example of a number of bicycles. What if somebody does metal work and they, I want to ensure that we're not just saying you can't have that on your property, that rather we're saying that it must be properly buffered or stored, fenced or something, because I think that there's an awful lot of use for an awful lot of different materials. One man's garbage is another man's gold, and where's the line? I just want to make sure that we're not precluding somebody from keeping material on their property or items on their property. As you referred to earlier about items that you might want to recycle, that you can have them, but they just need to be properly stored out of immediate sight. So just want to make sure that any sections of the bylaw do cover that.
Yes, yes. So you'll see that section 4.2 is actually stricken out. The reason for that actually is on further consultation after the last council meeting, I spoke with Sean, our planner, and basically outdoor storage is already mimicked in the zoning bylaw. And so to not be redundant and to have two pieces of legislation that speak to the same front, it was better addressed to just remove it, because in the actual zoning bylaw, it does state things like, screening from public view from roads and neighboring lots and things of that nature. So again, trying to go back into the intent of the bylaw to just say that somebody that just says, well, it has some value, or it's recyclable, doesn't necessarily garner that it doesn't meet the definition of refuse. That's all I was sort of trying to put in place, that everything will have value to someone at some point somewhere. But again, we're talking about once it becomes a violation at the very end. Going back 3 E's, we're going to encourage, we're going to educate, we're going to encourage, and then we're going to enforce. So hopefully this again is dealing with at the very end, if they're trying to say like it is completely, I want it to be recycled, or it has some value. I can understand that and appreciate that. But again, if they're all avenues have been taken to get rid of it, and it does meet the definition, then it will have to go.
Section 2.3 says that yard maintenance may include fertilizing. I'm not sure that we want to include that. Would ask other members of council their thoughts on that, but I know that we've had various discussions, during the various iterations of the shoreline preservation bylaw that a lot of people do not want fertilizer use. So I would like to see fertilizing as being something permitted, removed.
Certainly. Again, that was just something that was in everyone's kind of, bylaw wording, and just sort of put that in there. We can certainly at council's wishes, script that out.
Would council agree to that? Angie?
Does that mean that council is prohibiting fertilizing?
Deputy Mayor Dayu, then Councillor Shortreed, we'll go around.
Well, I would look to, I guess, to you and Dawn for the specifics on it, but I would see that as a different bylaw. This is just removing the explicit endorsement, but doesn't prohibit. That's how I would interpret this.
Yeah, me too. Counselor Short Reed,
Or if it could say natural fertilization. Yeah. Like natural, not chemical. A lot of fertilizers now are natural. They aren't chemical. There's very few that are chemical.
Madam CAO.
And one of the things I also learned was that composting is also used for fertilizer. So that is a natural.
I could live with that as opposed to removing it entirely, as long as people understand the difference. Counselor Berry, then Counselor
I just
Richards.
wanted, on this one, I just wanted clarification. Why is this one in yellow
It's been changed.
opposed to the red? The red has just been taken out? Okay. Because I couldn't really clarify on what was changed specifically.
Okay, sorry about that. So,
Yeah.
so red line is gone.
Yeah.
Yellow highlight is absolutely completely new, something that I.
It's
felt
new.
needed- yeah,
Okay.
Something that I felt we needed to have a little bit more clarification on, or to try to make things a little more clear to the general public. Or to really anyone
Okay.
that's reading the file to help narrow things down, because I felt like after our last meeting, everyone wasn't too sure where we were trying to go. And so if our council isn't able to do that, and that speaks for the town ratepayers and taxpayers, then I felt the need to narrow it down and to try to be really specific. At the same time, to not be too restrictive. So it's a little dance, fine line, trying to write the bylaw to work for all.
Well, especially when you're trying to please all of us. Counselor Richards.
Section 2.2 L, we were talking about animal feces and waste products. Would this bylaw enable us to enforce like a poop and scoop situation? Or is that something we've got to do separately?
So through you, Mayor, this bylaw deals with private property, so this could be homeowner ratepayer property. If you're speaking of all over the township roads, side of the road, there's lands, parks, things like that. Then would you require an amendment to a dog control bylaw or a student scooper. However the verbiage is. Exactly, this is dealing with animal excrement on private property, to the point where I have personally had problems walking. There has been that much excrement around, and you can imagine the odor. So again, trying to deal with nuisance issues for neighbors and an odor.
And as far as the hides go that are mentioned there, we're not talking about somebody who's got boarded up hides that maybe are just unsightly to the neighbor at the time, but through its process, they get cleaned up. You're talking about like an obvious, just tossed hides everywhere.
Yeah, and perhaps through you, Mayor, I could sort of touch on, again, going back to the composting. I had a personal situation on a property where there was about, I want to say about 12 deer hide. And the property owner thought it was fine to leave them there and to just cover them with a little bit of straw, and told me they were composting. And so again, that was, you could smell the rotting flesh from like 2 miles down the road. So it was one of those situations where I had no authority. Like there was absolutely nothing I could do for a bunch of ratepayers based off of one property. So again, the bylaw isn't going after anyone that's properly harvesting, properly, tanning hide, whatever, they choose to do. It's trying to get the runoff that's here and there that are a nuisance or a problem.
So another somewhat discretionary item. Counselor Berry.
I actually, on the same one, animal feces, how does that work in regards to, I know every spring, several families that get a load of manure and initially there's a big pile of manure and it's animal feces. How does that work with that section?
Is this like agriculture use? Is that like to spread it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, maybe that's something that we, at council discretion, we should include in there. I was basically just going off of, the idea of like pet or animal in that aspect of the excrement, not something that would be used or cultivated. Again, we're trying to promote composting and
Mhm.
naturalization and all these things. So
Gardening.
gardening, yeah, again, we're going back to intent. I know there's really no way to put it in writing. So I've done the best possible that I could. Again, if council direction, we could include or disallow or an exemption.
I'm not so sure that would be needed because in that section, it's talking about refuse, which means it's specified there. It means waste, debris, article, thing, matter, effluent that has been cast aside or discarded or abandoned. So to me, if they had a pile of manure that was intended to be spread at some point for whatever purpose, that wouldn't fall into that definition.
Go ahead.
True. However, in other areas within the bylaw, it says like no refuse, no waste. So by having it in the definition section and then not allowing it in other sections, there's a conflict.
Can you refer to those sections?
Well, in yards, it says every owner or occupant of property shall ensure the property, including vacant land, is maintained and free of those things. Free of refuse. So
Go ahead.
If I may, through you, Mayor, I think at some point, everyone is going to have something that's going to meet the definition. The bylaws for the greater good, that's the intent. So again, I don't think we're going down a path that would eliminate a lot of the bylaw if we were to really pull out specifics. It needs to be broad to a certain extent. And again, I know that it's a struggle to deal with, how someone does the job or how the role is done or the interpretation of say the officer. But we just have to keep in mind that if it's not in here, nothing can be done about it. And I think to touch on Angie's point, yes, I sort of lost track when you were speaking about manure. Yes, that is an intended use. I walked up to the property and they said, oh no, I'm just leaving it there forever, or I have no plans for it. Okay, well then we need to figure out a plan for it. But if it's an intended use for gardening and they've specifically had it delivered, again, we're speaking on the terms of it's just been cast aside, left, abandoned, absolutely no regard. So this bylaw is in theory for a limited amount of ratepayers. But I just caution to really pull a lot of it out because it will not give enforcement on the back end.
Deputy Mayor Dayu.
I have a question that is in a way the inverse of that question, and it has to do with vehicles. And I'm looking specifically at the yards section. So that's 4.1 where you talk about wrecked, dismantled, inoperative, discarded, unlicensed, or abandoned vehicles, trailers, boats, etc. What would happen if there was a property where there had been a number of vehicles on the site for many, many years, but they didn't quite tick any of those boxes? So say they hadn't budged for years, but technically they're still operable or with a tiny bit of repair. Say their licenses have been renewed every few years. Would you have any teeth if you received a complaint saying it's unsightly that there are 10 vehicles on this property when they shouldn't be? Or would that be one of those things where you couldn't do something because it doesn't actually fit?
I think you've given me quite a few scenarios in there. I don't know that it can be one or the other, because if a vehicle has sort of sat in sort of a stage of just being abandoned for years upon years, I guess they would have to prove to me, is it licensed? Is it operable? Can it be turned over? Can you move it? Then I would probably have to go back and resource the zoning bylaw to find out what they're zoned. How many vehicles are they permitted to have? I think I can't quite answer your question because there's quite a few variables here that I'd have to look into. But to be quite honest, again, sort of to touch on Councillor Berry's point before about, how would you approach something like that? We have a property that I have been dealing with where there are 6 vehicles that were left for years upon years. Through education and some encouragement, that ratepayer was able to actually earn some income and was able to sell those older vehicles and make some good value off of it. So again, we just flipped it around and it met both criteria. So
Angie.
I just wonder, Kristen just spoke to this being in the zoning bylaw, and she's absolutely correct. It is in the zoning bylaw, and only one vehicle is allowed in the zoning bylaw. So that may be a section that similarly could come out because it is covered in the zoning bylaw.
Only one
Derelict.
abandoned or derelict
Yeah.
vehicle.
Do you recall, Angie, is that for all zones?
I don't know that.
Okay.
I don't recall.
So we might want to follow up on that.
Mhm.
Councillor Barry.
While we're on that, in the exemption, I just wanted clarification on section. Sorry. Sorry. I saw it now. I'm trying to find it again. I think it's section 7.1. D. It does not apply to a maximum of 2 derelict vehicles from being repaired on rural property zone, provided that there are only 2 vehicles being actively repaired. And then she's taken out screen from public view and put in, they are not visible from street, side, or abutting lots. Does that mean every other property, there's a different number of maximum?
No, sorry, through you, Mayor, that is specifically from the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
I was trying to clarify that on a rural property, that's the maximum that you're allowed to have. And I took out the word, the word screen from public view, because that is not the actual verbiage from the zoning bylaw. So I used exactly what was in there. But to Angie's point, I believe, yes, one derelict vehicle through our zoning bylaw is only permitted on every other property. Other than rural. Rural is allowed 2 derelict property or vehicles, sorry.
On that same section, I'm concerned, I'm not clear when we're talking about exemptions. Section E talks about outdoor storage, about stacked firewood or logs, and 4.2, you refer to 4.2.1. I can't see, how these tie together. And I would not want us to say that you're not allowed to keep stacked firewood or piles of firewood for anyone, because I think anybody who's got a wood stove gets loads of wood dumped in their yard and it takes them a while to stack it up. And can you tell me what your intent is there?
That has been stricken out. That's gone. Again, that was worked in with the last, the first presentation of the bylaw that had come forth with the outdoor storage. So the whole outdoor storage section has been removed, as well as this section 7.1E is now redlined, so it is not in there at all.
Okay, I understood by it being redlined that you were taking it out of the exemptions, which meant that it wasn't allowed.
But it's out altogether.
Okay.
Sorry. Perhaps I should have clarified that at the beginning.
And talking about exemptions, exempt from the provisions of this bylaw, farm and agricultural uses, environmentally protected zones, forested areas. You're saying that they're exempt from people having refuse or putting refuse? I mean, that there are properties in the municipality that have sections of them zoned EP.
Okay, sorry, give me 1 second here. So
I mean,
section A was strictly to deal with the naturalized areas and grass greater than.
I'm talking about 7G.
No, perhaps that was an oversight. Perhaps we do need to go delve into that a little further. However, farm and agriculture use through permitted zones, like most of this was in consultation with the planner, that certain things we cannot restrict to happen on certain properties. But I think working towards the idea of storing of refuse, we may need to make this a little more clear then. Now, to your point, I can see where that just went, where in my mind, I was seeing it completely different. But now I totally understand where you're coming from. We need to sort of putting that a little more clear,
Yeah.
that we're mostly talking about, like naturalization and long grass and all those things are permitted in those zones. That we would basically be leaving those alone. We wouldn't be touching them. But as far as depositing or leaving refuse on there, I think we have to maybe clarify that.
Make some
So that
clarification
should
there.
probably-
Definitely. The only other question that I had was in part 8. And I can't tell you exactly which clause it is, but it looks like there's some allowance for somebody to get a search warrant to go into a building. Why would you need a search warrant to go inside a building?
Municipal law enforcement officers do not have the authority to step on or to enter a dwelling or enter into a residence without a search warrant. I am no different than a police officer in that.
Why would you want to go into a residence or into a building if we're talking about property standards?
Yeah, sometimes there's the off chance, and again, this is strictly coming from the municipal act and how it's laid out, that we have to specify those authorities, but there may be times where, say the odor, is coming maybe from, let's maybe use harvesting of deer, for example, is coming from inside a structure or inside a shed on the property, as well as being stored outside, that may be a time frame that if we're going in to remedy the property, that I may feel in consultation with management that we might need to have a search warrant to double check what's going on inside to, again, deal with the nuisance. So the nuisance is the odor, but we would have no authority to peek into that shed or enter that shed. I can only deal with what I see on the outside. Those are very one-off cases. Again, never in my career have I had to do that. But it is just something that legislatively we can put in there and that we should be putting in there for the one-offs, if ever.
You might discover a murder.
Gosh, I hope not.
No, I just, I really kind of thought a search warrant really was my initial reaction, and I guess I'm looking for thoughts about that. Councilor Barry.
I have that written down here too. And is this something that could be taken out? Like, you would still have those authorities? Does it need to be written?
Yeah, see, there's a thing, you do need to put it into the bylaw in order to be able to act on it, and that's, why I wanted the discussion. I'm glad to hear that you've never had to do that. And I mean, I just said, well, maybe we need to define that or just clarify that a little bit more. Go ahead, Angie.
And it's that isn't something that Kristen would just do on her own. That would be in conversation with me and perhaps could come to council for direction. So it's not something that it would be a rare situation that would ever occur.
But should we run into that rare situation, this would be the only way we could deal with it. Go ahead.
But that isn't written in the policy that's how that process. Like what I'm concerned is that the next person that's in bylaw or another down the road, and because the bylaw is not just for this term, it's a bylaw that would be reviewed or adjusted accordingly, but there's nothing in there that says that's the process. It would be the practice, but not the process.
I'd be reluctant to take it out because if we really did need to follow up on something, there is a way to do that. Mind you, I guess you could always contact the police. Deputy Mayor Dayu?
I hear what you're saying, but I do think that it's implicit in the way it's written, that management would be involved. I don't believe a search warrant would be ever sought by a bylaw officer without going through the CAO. And it does say further on in 8.4, this is solely to determine whether the property complies with this bylaw. So it would be stuff like odor. I mean, odor would be one of the only reasons really, and nothing else would be relevant. So
But if it only says to comply with this bylaw, it could be anything.
and if I may, I do get that, but derelict vehicles, the spreading of refuse, all of that wouldn't apply. I mean, I struggle to think of another part of the bylaw that would apply to the interior, and it would be such a rare instance that I actually feel quite comfortable in there. The spirit of it, I get it could be problematic for some, but I think
we've covered ourselves quite well with how it's worded.
Counselor Shortreed.
I agree, but also, if you had a search warrant, you're not going in there on your own search warrant, right? You're taking OPP or something like that. So it's gonna be something serious if she's gonna get,
Doesn't say that she has to take the OPP with her.
no, I'm just, yes, but I'm just saying that I can't see.
Counselor Berry.
Well, specifically, the wording is that an officer may at any reasonable time, like depending on how you read it, like what is reasonable? Can it say in here that in consultation with the CAO? Can we?
Or under extraordinary
Under
circumstances,
extraordinary, to me, at reasonable times means that's
anytime.
anytime.
Go ahead.
There is through the courts, and with the police, there is a general, rule of thumb that it's between the hours of 8 AM and 8 PM. It's not spelled out, it's just something that I guess is known, in the enforcement community. We would never, step on property in the middle of the night, things of that nature. So, reasonable time means in theory, daylight hours.
I
more
don't,
often than not.
I do not interpret it that way at all. And I think it could be interpreted in any number of ways, nothing to do with the time per se, but basically under any reasonable circumstance. It could be interpreted that way as well, which I think is, kind
Is
of,
where, okay. And I believe that comes straight out of the municipal act. I would have to double check 100% to make sure that that was the actual wording in the section of the municipal act. But generally, that's where that section comes from.
but I think I'm also hearing that council are looking for something more to the effect under extraordinary circumstances and in consultation with management that you may. And I think that, there'd be a lot greater comfort level if we had some similar wording to that.
Certainly.
Madam CAO.
Just to go back to the derelict vehicles, Sean is watching, so he let me know that I'm wrong on that, and I apologize. That it is 2 vehicles, and the section in the zoning bylaw states, unless otherwise permitted, unused or derelict motor vehicles, farm implements, and similar abandoned equipment shall not be located or stored outside on any lot in any zone, except that a maximum of 2 unused motor vehicles may be stored outside in a rural zone. So it's only allowed in the rural zone, and 2 are.
And it also says unless otherwise authorized.
Yeah. No, unless otherwise permitted. in the
Okay,
bylaw.
permitted.
Yeah.
Councilor Berry.
So no other property can have an inoperable vehicle?
More than 2.
Except in the rural zone only. So not along the shoreline, not along in
Hamlet.
town, no. Only in the rural zones.
Sorry, I'm just thinking. I just personally am in a position where I know that the cost. Part of my problem is our economy, and we're in a time when money is hard. And I feel that some of this is restricting people from being able to take parts off of a vehicle. I can see on a small property where there's water and there's an opportunity for, old engines to seep into the water and that, but I think there's some people that aren't in the position to just buy a new vehicle at, every opportunity.
But they're still allowing for 2 vehicles.
And rural. That's it.
But we're pretty rural here. And I would only rural, not agricultural. Madam CAO.
That's maybe where we need Sean, but like agricultural uses are permitted in a rural zone. So it is the rural zones. I mean, council has to have the discussion that was the discussion that was had when the zoning bylaw was implemented was that's what council wanted for the community. So if council has changed direction on if you want to permit derelict vehicles in the shoreline areas, that's a different discussion.
I guess where it gets complicated is there's a difference between an acre that's on shoreline and 100 acres. Like some people have 100 acres on shoreline.
Well, the shoreline bylaw talks about derelict vehicles too, so that's a different, that's a different kettle of fish. I think we're primarily talking about rural, and I mean, I think that there's enough room here, 2 vehicles. You know, unless you're in some kind of business that's kind of, if you've got more vehicles than that, you're not just storing them for spare parts for your vehicles. Personally, I think we're good with allowing the 2 vehicles and no more. But that's just me. Deputy Mayor Dayu?
I think where the wiggle room might exist would be that if you are storing those vehicles in order to repair your active vehicle, you haven't abandoned them. You are actively working with those vehicles. They have a constructive purpose. And there is a recognition of constructive purposes in the bylaw, in the exemption.
Okay, any other sections that we want to raise as concerns? Councillor Berry.
With the exemptions, it doesn't state commercial, and I just wanted clarification. Is commercial, are any of our commercial zones exempt from this policy?
Through you, Mayor, no, we don't have that written in this, because there are certain aspects of the bylaw that could come into play into a commercial property as well, including the storage of some of the refuse. Again, maybe have to go back and speak with Sean, depending on what is found at a property, if there was a complaint and it's a commercial nature. But we wanted to keep it open to make sure that it fell in line. That certain properties, everybody's property for the most part would be maintained to a certain level. So we wanted to include that. We didn't want to prevent or take out commercial properties from, say, dealing with their garbage if their garbage bins are overflowing, or they've got a whole bunch of, I guess, derelict vehicles stored in parts and components, and there's no direct use for the commercial, or just again to be able to capture the one-offs here and there that may not be in line with their property use as commercial.
I'm sorry, but maybe I misunderstood. Did you not say that commercial is not included in the bylaw, and you're saying it is? Maybe you could, it's something that I missed completely, but I do think that if we're going to have a clean and clear bylaw, that it should include all types of property.
Yes, it does include, it would include commercial. It has not been exempt.
Where is that in the bylaw?
It would be one of the properties. So the only other properties that are exempt would be the farm and agriculture, EP, forested areas, and the township owned properties that are mentioned there. So any other zoned properties would be captured.
Oh, okay,
under this.
okay.
Sorry. Miscommunication there.
And we're going to relook at that section anyway.
Yes, I'm going to clarify that to try and help with, that we're only talking about refuse per se. We're not talking about naturalization or the long grass. We want to leave those aspects alone in those specific areas.
So any other specific concerns about the bylaw? Obviously, it needs to come back to us, but now's the time because we only want to review this so many times. Anything else?
I had something, but I can't think of it.
Okay, well, it will come back and we can get clarification, but hopefully we've generally covered the concerns that we've still got. Thank you for your patience in this.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, we want to get it right for sure. We're dealing with everyone's properties and everybody's interests. We're not always going to make everyone happy, but for the greater good, this is what we do.
So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive this draft as information? Councillor Shortreed, Councillor Berry.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Berry. Be resolved, Council receives report BLDG 823, regarding the revised draft clean and clear bylaws submitted by Kristen Glass dated April 6, 2023, and the council directs staff to bring back revisions for further consideration.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
You too.
Thanks.
I think we will have a 15-minute break. Welcome back. Next item on the agenda is Parks, Recreation and Trails. Good morning, Mr. Card.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
You have a report for us.
Yes, so before you today is a report on the Inclusive Community Grants Program, which has just come available. Myself and department heads, along with the CAO, discussed this at their last department head meeting, and the CAO and I further refined some ideas that fit well within this opportunity. The deadline for applications is April 20th. And council will recall during budget time, and something that was discussed during budget time last year as well, was the upcoming need for replacement of the lights at the Dorset Lions Park. This opportunity aligns well with that. This provides up to $60,000 in funding. This project was initially quoted at $25,000, and actually this is something that's even moving right now, because as we've worked towards pulling some parts together to be able to finalize this application, I've gotten an updated quote, and for the purposes of this report, it is up slightly from $25,000 to $26,000, $26,050. I just received that information yesterday. So what I'm looking for today is council support and a resolution supporting the $26,050 application to be finalized and submitted. All of the details on the streams I'm looking to align this with are within the report, so I won't go over those specifically. Unless you'd like me to. And I also attached the program guide, which has all of the information there. We have had an opportunity to already reach out to our program administrator, which is our regional advisor, to have a discussion with them about the alignment of this project with the intention of the grant. And they've discussed and expressed that it does align well, and what's clear within the requirements is that it does need to align with an age-friendly plan, or what's typically called an age-friendly master plan. The county does have an age-friendly master plan that was developed in 2017. Council received some information at that time. As part of that plan, the Aging Well Committee was involved in that, along with a committee that was formed at the time to come up with various ideas with recommendations throughout the county. And One of those was that increasing accessibility to the walkability of community spaces. And part of that is lighting and providing adequate lighting in those spaces at nighttime. So we have the lighting there now, but the lighting is becoming problematic. Parts are becoming more difficult to source. It is a residential style lighting. It's been in place for 6 years now. So what this would achieve would be to remove that and replace the lighting with a more robust, longer lasting commercial style lighting that we would wire directly. That would be in line with a similar look for what's there now. So open to any through you, Mayor, thoughts or questions.
I'm personally really glad to see this project being recommended. It's something that we talked about in the past, and it's a great idea. But look to council for questions or comments. Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Thanks. Great to see this. Two questions. One is with regards to the lighting and with our overall commitment for a dark sky policy, would the lighting that you're suggesting be downward facing, or would it be more broad in its application?
It's something that does need to be finalized. And as of right now, we're looking at a similar style light to what's there now, which is like a perimeter style light. The light points down from the top of the fixture. However, it's not confined to just reflecting down. It's pointing down, but it's a four-sided kind of glass fixture that's hanging. So it would light a perimeter. And actually, I was just looking at it. I got some further specifications yesterday, a 36-foot perimeter for each light. What that is into the sky, I don't know exactly at this time.
Okay, that would just be food for thought, I suppose.
So something to keep in mind when you're looking at the lights to the greatest extent possible, because we keep emphasizing the need for, protecting dark skies wherever we can. And we need to be an example in that regard. Go ahead.
And then my second question, given that this is upwards of 60,000 pocket, you've suggested a project worth 24, but if I look at the program priorities, priority number 1, increasing accessibility to outdoor spaces to improve older and adults and people with disabilities community engagement. I wonder if there is something in addition to the lighting that would further support engagement, be it benches along that walkway or anything else, or is it your belief that actually asking for a bit more might reduce our chances of getting the grant at all?
My understanding is that it would be a separate application. If you're adding various components, we are a requirement of the grant is that you look for opportunities to partner with either seniors or groups that represent them. Yes, that's one of the priorities that you could streamline, but you do need to choose one. And in this case, we're looking at program priority 1, which is improving accessibility to those outdoor spaces, utilizing the lighting. We are able to create a partnership with the Aging Well Committee to meet the needs of gaining input from them. We already have reached out to them and they have expressed their interest in assisting with the project to the extent possible. Now we're just forming some ideas on exactly what that partnership might look like. But to start kind of looking at a broader scope where you're adding various components or pathway components, those types of things, I think that'd be moving into a second application. You're only allowed one.
I think we've got all kinds of opportunity to follow up and do something in the future on that. Councillor Barry?
Sorry, just following up on Councillor Dayu's thoughts there. Is there any plans for anything that would we be doing anyway that could be added as an input to this application? I'm thinking the benches. I have aging parents myself, and I often hear, "Well, where will I sit down?" So
In that very tone.
in that tone. So I just wonder. I wonder if that was something that we had planned to do anyway, if that would give us a leg up for an application.
Through you, Mayor, we don't have any plans in the budget this year to do any other installations like that. There are benches on the entranceway to the park in the beautiful log pergola that's there, or timber pergola. We do keep picnic tables throughout the park that meet accessibility requirements that we can move around based on what we observe where they're needed. As we have this discussion, as these ideas come forward, I think there's no reason I couldn't ask the Aging Well Committee to give input on those things in addition to this project. And I think that would align well.
What's the actual distance of that walking area?
I don't know exactly. It would be approximate. If I could give an approximation, it'd be 400 or 500 meters when you loop right around the back of the rink.
So I could see that it is something that we need to think about in the future, that a bench or two, some people can't go very far. Councillor Short-Reed.
Pretty sure there are benches when it loops back through the bush behind the rink, like so it goes around into the bush and back around the rink. There are a couple of spots of benches back there. Pretty sure.
And you're right. Now that you mention it, there's the bench on the back side of the loop. But none, where there might be opportunity is between the pergola and the exercise equipment and the rink within that kind of space.
But in the meantime, I'm hearing support for the, moving forward with this. We've only got a limited amount of time as normal. So could I have a mover and a seconder then? Councillor Berry, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved, Council receives report PRT 523 regarding 2023-24 inclusive community grants program submitted by Chris Carr dated April 6, 2023, and further council concurs with the recommendation in the said report and direct staff to submit an application for funding for the upgrade of outdoor accessible pathway lighting at the Dorset Lions Park in alignment with the age-friendly master plan for Haliburton County in the amount of $26,050.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
And you. Next on the agenda is the environmental business, starting with the revised terms of reference for Environment and Stewardship Committee. Good morning, Melissa.
Good morning, Mayor Council. The terms of reference, I do have to leave that with you. I haven't been.
Somebody want to speak to this? Deputy Mayor Dayu?
Sure. What you have before you is a revised version of the TOR based on the conversation we had
The what?
last time.
The what did you say? The TOR?
The terms of reference. Thank you very much. The revised terms of reference based on the last conversation we had about the committee. And really it just tightens up a little bit of the language and prioritizes policy a bit closer to the top and puts educational a bit below in order to suggest that a lot of the educational might flow from the policy, but it's not too far past what we had before, just a little bit stronger, more strongly in line with what previous members had suggested in my phone calls with.
Comments? Councillor Berry.
I support the changes. My only thought is, and I know it's been omitted, I'm fine with where the membership takes out the specifics of where these environmental things come from. However, the loss of youth being a priority is something that I feel strongly about. I feel that there should be some sort of language in there because inevitably, I think it's important that the youth are represented.
I concur.
Yeah.
I had a couple of comments. I thought that because we haven't even got the Environment Committee and Environment and Stewardship Committee in place yet, that you're talking about meeting every other month. I think that we need to be see the committee meeting monthly. Initially, yeah. And as opposed to saying every other month for now. So I'd like to see us make that change to meeting monthly. And that can, you know, I mean, that can change down the road easily. But I can see that there's a fair bit of work that this committee can do and get involved in, and that would facilitate that. Under finance, I'd like to see invoices submitted to the treasurer. I think it says forwarded to. I'm not sure what circumstances, if the committee members see themselves getting invoices, they shouldn't be. To me, all invoices should go directly to the treasurer. And I think that the terms of reference should reflect that. Any thoughts? Does that sound okay? And item 9. I see that an annual delegation to council has been struck out of the terms of reference. And I kind of liked the idea that there, you know, during the course of the year, I'm sure that the committee is going to come up with thoughts and ideas of things that they would like to do that might have a financial impact. I kind of liked that they would, you know, that there would be a bit of a delegation into the council and some ideas brought forward. Thoughts?
I think the intention there is that the committee would have more of an ongoing as needed relationship with council rather than there not being any delegation of any kind. Or that we wait until one moment in the year to have that conversation.
Oh, for me, that was understood. That
Okay.
There would be an ongoing, you know, relationship, but I think given, just as we ask the museum committees to submit something to us prior to budget, you know, outlining projects, kind of landing on, okay, here's what we've decided officially that we're going to do. That, you know, something similar be done, that there be a submission made and, you know, even come to council and present to us if that's, it can be a submission in writing. But yeah, I mean, I would understand that there would be an ongoing relationship for sure. Any other comments? Councillor Richards?
I'm wondering if, based on our conversation from this morning on the clean and clear bylaw, if we could have a little bit of wording about, you know, the committee reviewing those type of environmental bylaws that we have and their impact on the community, and bringing back some recommendations to council on how they're working, or if they need.
So you're looking for some form of general statement that would suggest the committee would consider any policies or bylaws that have environmental impacts
Yeah, the shoreline bylaw, the clean and clear.
without, we don't,
Without suggesting that they're in control of it, just, you know, because they're not, but making some recommendations or what they're seeing, that those bylaws are having an impact on, if they are.
I would like us to make a general statement about reviewing policies and bylaws that have an environmental impact rather than specifically saying this
The
bylaw,
particular
because
bylaw. Yeah.
that might tighten things up more than you want.
Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Dayu.
That was the intention with the second paragraph under goals, but if that isn't clear, then definitely there's scope to improve the wording on that.
This is the slowest scrolling thing. Madam CAO.
Just to Deputy Mayor's point there on that second new paragraph, there may need to be further clarification on that, because I see that as more of a strategic goals implementation.
Okay.
Versus review of bylaws and policies. And I'm wondering if maybe council would consider including that word strategic, if that's the intent. And maybe as we review each terms of reference as needed, maybe we could include some words like that.
I think the words that we chose wanted to go a little bit in both directions. That, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand. May I answer that?
Go ahead. Yes. We all need to remember that, you know, that in order to be recognized by the chair, that you need to raise your
I
hand, but
apologize.
no, I mean, it's okay. It's an ongoing conversation. I'm not that, fussy.
Great. To provide input on the advancement of the township's policy goals for me wasn't just about the strategic, it was about encompassing all of the commitments that we already have made as a township. So if in support and in advancement of the clean and clear bylaw as it refers to environment, we can dig in a little bit to see, you know, how's that been going for the last year or whatever it might be, or it might be more high level, either climate change where relevant or whatever it might be. But that was sort of the broad brush. Let's incorporate it all. If that doesn't come through well enough, then by all means, we should tidy that up.
And you think there needs to be a little bit more thought put into this particular
Okay.
section, you know, I mean, policy setting is council's role. And I see some, you know, move within the committees to, you know, try to assume maybe a little bit more control over that. Obviously, we're looking for recommendations about environmental issues. Madam Clerk.
Perhaps more thought can be given around the wording, but something along the lines of advancement of the township's policies and bylaws with an environment component and new initiatives for council's consideration, something, anything that we have that has an environmental component to it.
Any other comments about the terms of reference that they're being proposed? So those will come back to us. Yeah, I think so. In the meantime, how are we making out with discussions with members for the committee?
I have spoken to all members who were there before, and not the decision, but the conclusion was that once this was finalized by council, they would look at it one more time just to see how in alignment the desire of council is with their personal interests, and then we would take it forward. So no further conversations since my last report.
Was there any contact made with the school about youth?
I did make that attempt and I have not heard back. They are winding up to almost to the end of the year. So my suspicion is the program that it would most probably inject into, which is the volunteer hours program, that will be winding up at this stage. So it could be that we'd be planting a seed for next year.
When we're
Councillor Berry.
planting those seeds, maybe we should reach out to the college. I know like it would be a shorter term, but there is youth that are enrolled there in 1-year programs. So we may have to change that around, but it would be another
It's
opportunity.
another possibility.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, and you might even talk to the youth hub
Yeah. Okay.
and see what level of interest is there, because I know that they're looking to help out with those things. And I'm wondering how we can, I've got to say that there is some feeling by those who were contacted that because they weren't contacted again, or there was no follow-up, they feel like, oh, they don't want us.
Oh.
So I'm just wondering how to, you know, maybe we can send out the draft terms of reference for them to, because they're primarily what we see now is basically where we're going to land with some minor changes. So, you know, maybe we can send them out the draft and just say, here's, you know, here's where we're at, and just so that they know that there's, you know, that, yeah, I mean, we want these groups to be part of the committee, you know, and you know, if possible. I can't recall where we stood with did we advertise publicly for members? And, oh, that's right, because we did get one interested party. I think we might need to do that again. If we could. Madam Clerk.
Just for clarification, would we like to wait until the terms of reference are approved before we advertise again?
Probably we should, but you know what, because I'm sorry to put this in your lap, but it was something that, you know, you'd assume responsibility for. So if you could maybe just touch base or send them an email sort of saying where we're at, and, you know, we're still very, very keen on their membership and
Yep.
and involvement, and that'd be great. Any other comments then about the terms of reference? So could I have a mover and a seconder to receive them? Councillor Shortreed and Richards.
Moved by Councillor Shortreed, second by Councillor Richards, be it resolved, council approves the revised, no, sorry, council receives the revised Environment and Stewardship Committee terms of reference. And further, that council directs revisions be brought back to council for further consideration.
All in favor? That's carried. And thank you. Thank you for that work. And next is your environmental monthly activity report.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you. In March, predominantly activities are related to sort of planning and preparation for the upcoming season. So not so much projects that are being completed, but being underway. We did have a meeting with the contractor for the Maple Lake Operations Center. So that was good just to get an update on their plans to get moving. And as soon as weather permits, they're back in their full steam and hoping to be on schedule for, as planned for the summer. So
No more supply chain issues that you're aware of?
I think as was stated, you know, supply chain, supply issues, come and go with the days of the week. So it is always an ongoing challenge there, but I think most of the supply needs have been met, that we've got the wall in place, we've got railings purchased, concrete is our one last supply issue that hopefully everything will work well with that. Concrete's a bit tricky because timing has to be just right, warm enough and that sort of thing. So we will keep our fingers crossed, I think is the plan there. But just a reassurance that no concerns on their part, and we were really happy with their report there. Just an update, the single tier waste management service delivery review RFP closed, and that contract has been awarded now. We're just waiting, I think, for execution of that. Dillon Consulting was the recommended consultant there. So that hopefully a kickoff meeting for that process will be starting shortly. And just to let you know, council had mentioned that the hours for the summer, I just have to get those have been updated on the website now. We have really taken a note to make sure that people are aware that it is new hours for this summer, not just an update from winter to summer, but this is a whole new structure. So heads up on that, and double check your usual schedules. So hopefully that message is getting out, and I'm working with Chad. We'll, as we get closer to the changeover date, we'll get some more notices out of it.
I should know the answer to this question, but do the cards that we sent out reflect the new hours?
Yes,
Good.
they do.
That's on my fridge, so.
Yep.
Councillor Berry?
Sorry, just clarity on the solid waste management sort of table you have there. When it says number of vehicles for 2023, we're down, is that by the month?
Yes.
Okay.
No, that's
Year to date?
year to date,
Okay.
and then year to year. So the change is year to year.
Okay.
So that's the vehicle count to the end of February. And then that's compared to what the same period of time was in 2022.
Thank you.
Tying in with our previous discussion on derelict vehicles. Any questions on, other questions on the environment report, Councillor Richards?
I'm just wondering on the food cycler pilot project. I think, as I understand, there's only 500 units available, hence 500 households, and we had more than that register. Is there going to be any movement for more, or is the program cut off? You're on your own.
Absolutely.
So the registration process has remained open, and that's to try and capture any further interest. A lot of interest is always generated when the new program gets launched. So we will capture those names, and then, looking at options. So at this point, county council, their direction was for 500 units. So this will be a process. It'll go back there to say, hey, there's another 500 people interested. Do we want to look at something further? And just based on what that interest is, and see how this is another pilot project, essentially bringing it to the county level. The funding that was available for this program, may not be available any longer. So each time it's sort of a revisit to.
There were some options offered for kind of a multi-year project, but I think that the uptake on it will have an impact on that and available funding. Go ahead.
Yeah, my concern is kind of did the lottery, I guess, in the winter months versus the summer with the seasonals. And I'm wondering if through more education, maybe through the Environment Committee to our seasonal population, that may have been a lot higher had it been more out there in the public for the seasonals. So is that something we want to pursue? Is that advertising to them? Because then if you do that and we don't go with more, we're kind of letting them down.
I think there is an opportunity for education about it. I don't believe that there's no additional money for it. I think we were actually pretty lucky to get it approved to go ahead this year at the numbers that we've got. But I'm sure that there are going to be more opportunities. I'm sure hoping there's going to be more opportunities, but they've all got a financial implication. Go to Deputy Mayor Dayu, then Councillor Berry.
No, I think you very much covered it. The funding that was given to us for this is now capped at what it was, and we needed to kickstart that project to county level right away. I don't believe we were permitted to delay until the summer. So any further work could certainly be taken up by the Environment Stewardship Committee. It'll be interesting to see where it goes at county next, but there was hesitation at county to buy into a multi-year project of this type. So we'd have to just see how that lands indeed.
I think those of us who supported the program are happy to see that we landed where we did. Mhm. Just keep that on your radar.
And if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't preclude us, as Algonquin Highlands for, looking at additional options in this community. I just, keep in mind that timing, and collaboration with the county this project hasn't wrapped up yet. So the units aren't distributed. There's still a fair bit of, time commitment to that and then the follow-up and that sort of thing. So, but certainly something, in the future we could put on the agenda.
Councillor Berry.
And just to, sorry. Am I not wrong that we sort of led this project first and now it's become a county issue? So Algonquin Highlands did get sort of a buy-in first round of the project. So I don't. And it was very successful.
And I think there's lots of opportunity for us to do that again. I'm not sure that there's an opportunity for us to do it for this summer. Is really only the hesitation because we haven't budgeted for it. I think we need to keep an eye on what programs the manufacturers are still willing to offer and what's available there, because that's a key part of moving forward with that program. But we can encourage people to acquire devices like that. Obviously, some of them are going to wait and see if there's another program, but any and all encouragement to take their proper steps is a good thing. See, the Environment Committee is going to have to meet monthly. That's all there is to it. Okay, so could we have a mover and a seconder to receive Melissa's report? Councillor Short, Reed and Berry.
Moved by Councillor Shortry, second by Councillor Berry. Be it resolved, Council receives report EB 1323 submitted by Melissa Murray and dated April 6, 2023 for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mayor and Council.
And next is Public Works business, and the first item is the Green Burial Ad Hoc Advisory Committee and their minutes. Any thing you wish to say?
I just think the committee is going quite well. These were the minutes from our first meeting. We haven't had a second meeting since then. And we're basically waiting right now for spring to melt so we can go as a group and walk the property, and Adam has sort of next steps in place, and the committee's looking at bringing more information forward soon. Jen?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is Adam and Co have worked on a starter layout that obviously we've got to see it, on site, and the committee will be feeding into it. But he has purposefully suggested a layout that could, at council's desire, easily offer winter burial options without further amendment. So it's really just a question of if and when council agrees to winter burial, it could just automatically happen at that layout.
You're ready for it.
Which is ready for it. So the committee right now is hoping that council might consider that a little bit sooner rather than later. So instead of waiting 2 or 3 years down the line, that once we get everything in line with green burial, that there wouldn't be too much of a need to delay our conversation on winter burial.
Madam Clerk.
Just to remind council that should council give that direction, there will be a bit of a delay because we'll have to amend our bylaw, cemetery bylaw, which is a process.
That involves others.
Yeah, we have to do the advertising for the 4 weeks, and the timing of that should be when people are visiting the cemetery so they can see the notice to the public, be transparent in that manner, and then the approval by the BAO.
It was the BAO that we needed to, they're part of that process, and I'm not sure how much time that takes. I noted that the discussion touched on the idea of another location, and I'm wondering if there was any discussion about like what that meant. Councilor Barry?
Not here specifically, but there is possibility that other areas in the county.
Okay,
Yeah.
I couldn't tell whether that was other locations within our municipality or if it was, say, maybe in Highlands East, because I know they're talking about it. Okay, well, we look forward to hearing about that. With respect to the presentation, that if there is in fact going to be a presentation organized, I would like to see that members of council would be able to attend, as well as, any other interested, just like the one that was in Dysart, if say Highlands East wanted to participate, or any of the other municipalities, that it'd be organized in such a fashion. And otherwise, like, great work. Like, I'm really liking what I'm seeing. It's great to see this moving forward, and kudos to everyone involved. So could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the green burial minutes of February 28th? Councillors Short, Reed, and Richards.
Moved by Councillor Short, second by Councillor Richards. Be it resolved, council receives the February 28th, 2023 Green Burial Ad Hoc Advisory Committee meeting minutes for information.
All in favor? That's carried. And next is the update on the Dorset Rec Center. Madam CAF.
Yes, thank you. So the mandatory site meeting was conducted as part of the RFP process, and we did have some good interest there. We have, I believe, 3 contractors that are interested and attended that day. The timeline for the closure of the RFP has proven to be a little bit difficult for the contractors. So we have provided a 2-week extension to that, just to make sure that we have enough submissions from the bidders. So, but otherwise we have issued two addendums now, just around some questions that were asked as a result of the mandatory site meeting and the extension on the timeline. So look
So-
forward to that closure.
Yeah, we all do.
Mhm.
So can you give us a closure date now?
The 27th, April 27th.
Any questions? Thank you. Up, go ahead.
If the closure is on the 27th, what is your thinking, Angie? Do you think that by our first council meeting in May, which would be exactly 1 week later, that we would be able to see the results of that, or is that wishful thinking?
I'm going to be cautious and say that's wishful thinking.
We could try and aim for that, but
We can try, yeah, but I'll be cautious on my answer there. Mhm.
just so long as it's noted that, I mean, there's a lot of remaining anxiety that we want to get this going. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir, I know that, but we really want to see activity starting as soon as possible, and because we have a grand Christmas party planned for the Dorset Rec Center. Right? Recreation Committee? No, I'm just, that's not a plan, but it's, would be nice. Go ahead.
I know Chris isn't here, so you may not be able to answer, you might. Has there been any further ideas or thoughts about the fitness equipment being able to be somewhere else in the interim, or?
I know he's still working on it and is going to bring something back. I don't know exactly where that is. No.
Pretty tight on locations of our own. Okay, so we'll look forward to hearing that. So no resolution with respect to that. We will move on to fire business, and I know the chief is really anxious to talk to us today.
Mayor and council,
Morning, chief.
morning. What I brought forward today is a staff report for replacing the pumper truck in Station 60 Dorset. Back in 2012, Algonquin Highlands took on a master plan, and during that time, a fleet replacement plan was put in place. And the pumper in Dorset was scheduled to be replaced in 2020. When I started here in 2021, it hadn't been done yet, and we had some issues because of a rescue truck that had being replaced on insurance, and also Oxen Lakes pumper was behind time too. So we were constructive plans, and it went in place really well. We put a new mini pumper in Oxen Lake. We moved the rescue from there down to here. So being very proactive. And at the same time, we put a plan in place that over a 3-year reserve period, we'd put the money in place to replace this pumper in Dorset, which would be next year. We have had some issues come up based on the COVID and that. The average vehicle delivery dates now are between 2 and 4 years. In doing that, they put in certain stipulations. If we put it out to tender right now and they get it, they do CPI. So the consumer price indexing would get added each year. So a vehicle like that ranges between $475,000 and about $550,000 a year. So if we were to get the same as last year, that'd be an increase of $30,000 per year. In addition, if you happen to have a Cummins engine in, and it's after January 2026, the new engine to meet environmental standards, the Cummins one goes up $125,000. So another price increase there. And the third issue, more for the residents of Dorset, is the fire underwriters survey. So the vehicle is only good for 20 years to be insurance for a response vehicle. This is a 2020 vehicle, or sorry, 2002 vehicle, but we've taken, that was the cabin chassis. The pump panel itself is a 2004, so that was put in service. So that's why we're going to 2024 year. So being proactive in trying to avoid all these issues that come with price increase in that, I went out and I got 3 different suppliers supply prices of stock vehicles. So a stock vehicle means it's on the line, it isn't produced yet, but it's in the process. So the 3 dealers did provide pricing for us. In the Dorset station, the doors are 10 feet high, which is low doors. So two of them won't fit in the place. The third one from the recommended company does fit. It's 110 inches versus you have 120. So it does result in being the lowest price. So I have contacted a volunteer department in close proximity here. They have 9 stations. And this identical truck is used as their prototype vehicle. Chief said that the company's got great service. And they actually each year, or each time they need to replace one of their vehicles, it's already set, and that's the vehicle they use for all their stuff. So they've had great success that way. The nice thing about it, it's built in Winnipeg, so it's Canadian made. So I think being proactive could save us a lot of money in the long term here. We do have reserves right now of $371,000 towards the 400, and I just get the exact price. $496,000, for approximately $121,000 short for that. So working with the treasurer, what we would like to do is reserve or from the common reserves. In next year, when it comes time for budgeting, every year we allow approximately $270,000 to go into reserves. We just move it out of our fire department budget or the budget and put it back into the general budget. So if there's any other questions, feel free through the mayor.
Questions of the chief? Sounds like a good plan to me. Question?
Just to be clear, are we accepting this recommendation as well as the annual contribution to reserve? Or are we just supporting the fire truck?
So the ask is to borrow the additional money that's required from our general reserve and pay it back next year. So yes, we will need approval for that.
Okay. It's an opportunity that we just really shouldn't miss. Go ahead.
So are we also supporting an annual contribution of?
We're just paying
Of the
back
270?
we're paying back what we're borrowing
I understand that.
from. No, other than that, I mean,
Okay.
That's an annual budget discussion. Any other questions? Could I have a mover and a seconder to buy a new fire truck? Councillor Shortreed and Barry. Hang on, wait till we pass the resolution. Don't thank us yet. You haven't voted.
Moved by Councillor Short, seconded by Councillor Barry. Be it resolved, council receives report FD 523 regarding the fire pumper replacement station 60 submitted by Michael French dated April 6, 2023, and council concurs with the recommendation made in the said report and authorize a single source purchase of a new pumper as quoted in the amount of $496,204 plus HST, and directs the fire chief to proceed with the project immediately, and further that the additional funds required be funded from the general reserves.
All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. You too. Nothing under finance today. Under admin, we have the Dorset Museum Committee update. Any comments, anything you'd like to add to that, Councillor Shortreed?
Just regular everyday activities at the museum. There's nothing
Any questions?
extraordinary.
Could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the minutes of February 28th? Councillor Shortreed, Deputy Mayor Dayu.
Moved by Councillor Short, seconded by Deputy Mayor Dayu. Be it resolved that council receives the February 28th, 2023 Dorset Heritage Museum meeting minutes for information.
All in favor? That's carried. Next up is planning business. Good morning, Mr. O'Callaghan.
Good morning, Mayor and Council.
First up is the cultural plan working group minutes.
So I'm not part of that working group, but it does fall under planning, so I don't have any comment on that.
Any comments then that wish to be made about the minutes? I see that the committee has, although these are not minutes per se, I kind of misspoke in the fact that they are considered to be more notes than minutes. And we will be receiving them just simply for information rather than approving them. There was has been some thought by the committee that, you know, to your comment that you're not part of that maybe we consider, would ask the CAO to consider the possibility of assigning a committee member as appropriate to that committee to help them along. But we'll leave that with you. Otherwise, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the cultural committee notes as presented or as amended? I think there's been several slight amendments to the first. Since there's been a committee or a working group meeting, there was discussion about it. So there's a couple of slight amendments to them. Correct?
There have been no amendments to what is on the agenda.
Oh, okay. But there's been some discussion. So we'll just receive them for information. Could I have a mover and a seconder to do that? Councilors Richards and Shortreed, thanks.
Moved by Councilor Richards, second by Councilor Shortreed, be it resolved, council receives the cultural plan working group February 28th, 2023 meeting minutes for information.
All in favor? That's carried. So next is your report on floating accommodations. Interesting report.
It is. So the Ministry of Natural Resources is seeking comment on proposed changes to the Public Lands Act, and that's specific to floating accommodations. So the proposed changes would not restrict any specifically designed vessels for sleeping and overnight accommodation, but this is more directed towards structures that have been popping up in other municipalities where someone would take a barge and construct a dwelling on that. So there were a number of other changes that were proposed, which have since been removed from the proposed changes that the ministry is putting forward. My understanding is they'll be addressing those through a separate amendment to the Public Lands Act. So staff have prepared a draft comments to submit on behalf of council with respect to the proposed changes. And I'm happy to answer any questions should council have any.
Well, thank you for your work on that. I really appreciate to see the comments that you've made. I didn't see anything that needed to be added, but any comments from council or thoughts? Councillor Shortreed.
I don't know if it matters, but there's nothing that really states an EP area, like, is that automatic or is it already included in it?
So the EP areas within the water would only be a fish habitat. But I'm not sure municipal zoning would override provincial legislation because we don't regulate anything below the high water mark. So my initial thought would be we wouldn't be able to restrict these from being located within an EP area.
Even though an EP area is the water end.
Right. So because municipal zoning wouldn't apply. So I'm not sure
It's unfortunate.
But there have been some distances set from the shoreline, which would, I would think, cover any particular fish habitat areas. Did you have a comment that you wanted to make? Okay. Any other councillor, sorry, Deputy Mayor, are you?
Thanks. Two questions, Sean, if I may. The first is, would you kindly clarify, sorry, scrolling. The initial proposed changes also include reducing the number of days that a person can camp on water from 21 to 7. And then in the next bullet, increasing the distance that a person camping on water must move. Does it mean that a person can move a kilometer and the 7-day starts again? Okay, so it's not per calendar year, it's per session.
That's correct. So that right now under the Public Lands Act, if you were to camp on Crown land, the same rules would apply where you have to move 100 meters from where you're camping.
Yeah.
So they're proposing to increase that for when you are camping on water.
Okay,
But a point of clarification, that is something that's been removed now from these proposed changes. And that will be addressed under a different
okay.
period for comment. But in my draft comments here, I am suggesting that be reintroduced. I understand the province is intending to do that, but I think it's important that we also include that in these comments.
Agreed. You know, I've just sort of, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is you're looking out into your bay and there's somebody who's out there and they've only got to move a short distance, you can still see them. Just as, you know, as one aspect of it, but go ahead.
And then my second question on the same bullet, actually, initial proposed changes include reducing the number of days that a person can camp on water rather than
Or group.
a group or, well, no, not even a group, but a boat, like a device. So could someone trying to Airbnb it claim, well, I only had this person for 3 days and then this group for 4 days. So, you know, there's a constant takeover of people. It would be a technicality, but would people not take advantage of that to the degree that they can? And could we suggest the structure
The
cannot
obvious
stay?
answer is yes, they will take
Yeah.
advantage to every extent possible.
Yeah.
It's a good point.
Yeah, no, you raise a good point, and that's something I can, I'll amend my comments to
Thank you.
address that.
That'd be great.
Any other comments? Questions? Councillor Berry?
Just a logistic question. If it was being used for Airbnb, how would that work in regards to like facilities? Like washrooms? On a raft, like if you built a area
Tanks.
on it. Pardon?
Holding tanks?
Hmm.
Yeah, indeed. Go ahead, Sean.
And that's something I also included in my comments is that a suggestion that the ministry look at restricting these sorts of permitted structures on lakes where adequate pump out facilities exist, where that could be disposed of.
Any other questions or thoughts? Could I then have a mover and a seconder to approve the comments as amended, I guess? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Richards. Don't run away, Sean. After our resolution, I've got one more thing I wanted to ask you.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Richards, be it resolved, council receives report submitted by Sean O'Callaghan dated April 6, 2023 regarding Public Lands Act floating accommodations, and the council supports the proposed comments as amended and directs staff to submit comments on behalf of the Township of Algonquin Highlands to the province regarding proposed changes to the Public Lands Act floating accommodations.
All in favor? That's carried. Thanks for your work on that. I just wanted to mention, again, I mentioned earlier and I know this is not exactly on the agenda, but we did have a pretty fulsome day yesterday. And I've mentioned to our CAO that we would in the future like to have a discussion about housing and what we can do, albeit probably limited. I just want to, say, put your thinking cap on, based on what you heard yesterday, what might be relevant to us and what you think we might be able to do. Because I think that there's probably a number of ideas around the table that we'll want to talk about in the future. That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Sure, and just to comment on that, it was a good opportunity yesterday to sort of, advertise the new zoning bylaw that we have where it does allow accessory dwellings and apartments in certain zones. So, I agree. Yesterday was a very beneficial day.
As one of the limited planners in the room, Sean was able to provide some clarification. It was excellent to have you there and be recognized. Algonquin Highlands at once again, we're ahead of the pack. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
So we're into external board meetings. First up is the community partnership. Councillor Shortreed.
Funny enough, we just had one on Tuesday, finally. So that was exciting. They had it at the church, full to capacity with a lot of people canceling because of the potential weather, but it was still full. There was myself, 3 councillors, CAO from Lake of Bays there. They did a presentation about all the projects, but mainly the pavilion, what's happened there, the money, the volunteer work, the grant, so on and so forth. I was asked to speak about the rec center. So I decided going in that there were so many rumors going around that I best to quell the rumors. So I just gave a brief timeline from the beginning till now. I had so many questions. So many people wanted to know everything. I also took the Cambrian report of the mold with me because there are so many factors in that report that contributed to the overall condition of the rec center. So everybody really wanted to know why. And I think when I explained everything that happened, everybody was happy to know the truth. And I had a couple people ask, how can we find what the next steps are, where we are at? They all want to know where we're at. And just looking, I know Chad updates the website under the community center, but it'd be nice just to have like a point form of where we're at. Because that's all I did. I said, you know, COVID started this, like just point form. And because they all want to know where we're at, like where we are at in the process. So even if we could put on it like today, that you've extended the date to April 24th, whatever it was for the 10th, like they just want to know where we're at and where we're going. So, but it was a great meeting. It was a really, really good meeting.
Any comments or questions? Councillor Richards.
I'm just wondering, you mentioned the pavilion
Mhm.
and what Lake of Bays is doing there. Can you just, how is that perceived by the community, or what questions did they have about that pavilion and where that's going in the
Actually,
future?
no one asked. The only person who got questions was me. Like Colin didn't get any questions really about anything in the pavilion or anything like that. I think he was there, he was stressing the fact to the Lake of Bays Council of how much the community used it, because he did have a huge list of all the things it's been used for, especially since COVID, and what their plans are. He had the plans, we've seen them before, for the soccer and tennis courts that they want to put there and so on and so forth. So I think he was just trying to show Lake of Bays how much it is a community gathering spot, how much the community's put into it and how much the community wants it. But other than that, they didn't say anything, but nobody said they didn't want it. And he was just showing a point to them that is a huge draw to the community for tourism, recreation, and community use.
I'm sure we'll be hearing more about that, you know, once there's, you know, more decisions made, you know, in Lake of Bays about how the direction they're going to take. I might add, though, that, you know, if the partnership has got plans to put more facilities there, that might be create an even greater concern for Lake of Bays, because more facilities, more liability, more responsibility for maintenance. So, you know, it's just kind of food for thought that, I mean, of course, we want to keep that, you know, that facility there and see it remain, but there's got to be some cautionary notes there.
Well,
Go ahead.
also the senior center on Highway 117 came up, and nobody on Lake of Bays really offered any explanation. So I did say, because I had talked to somebody, and so I did say that it was built a long time ago, and Boyd Griffin was there, and I asked him to tell people when it was built. It was the old ride out council chambers, actually built in the late 40s, and it's had a couple of additions, but really nobody's put any effort into it. So that's why the Township of Lake of Bays is looking at getting rid of it, it sounds like. So it looks like Colin is trying to take the direction from there that they're not going to have it anymore and bring Lake of Bays into the use of Dorset and the pavilion.
Yeah. You have to be, you know, it's a fine line, and, you know, it just, that is not one of our facilities.
No.
We've not been
No.
asked to do anything about it.
No.
You know, we have the rec committee and the cultural committee have talked about, you know, okay, you know, what can we do for seniors? What programs? I mean, we're certainly willing to talk about programming, especially when the rec center opens up again, but that particular issue is not ours to be responsible for.
Nope.
Any questions? Thank you. Okay, next up, the Health Hub. 'Cause I'm sure you had another exciting meeting there. Okay. I understand that we have received some financial requests from them.
We have received their request, their invoice. That's what they do, is submit an invoice for last year's funding that council approved for them
Hold the money.
to retain. So we have received that. We haven't received any invoices for this year at this time.
Okay. So would there be a little bit of a report that comes forward to us about what that was for, what it covered?
Normally that hasn't happened. Council has just given the direction it's for capital, and then that comes through. If it's for capital, then we pay it.
Just, I think it might be nice to know what it was used for.
Yeah, we can provide.
Just for our
that.
information, so, it just, I think that that's information that we'd like to
It
know.
was used, they built a third medical room. So that's what it was used for, but
And was any of it used for the for internet service?
no,
That's this year. Okay. See, that's why the question comes up. What's the money being used for? I mean, we say yes, capital purposes, but just as a matter of information. Go ahead.
so now going forward every year, that money that we do for the hub, that'll be just, we won't even have to have this discussion because we're just gonna be paying their monthly fiber bill.
Go ahead.
That is, I mean, this council can direct differently, but that was the direction of the previous council.
Right,
Yes, that
right.
that was approved, that
original.
once that was in place, we would pay that on an ongoing basis.
But otherwise, their annual financial request would and should come back to us. And it would even be nice to see, what the proposal is. This year, we would like to do this, and so we're asking for X amount of dollars. Okay, any questions on the Health Hub? Councillor Richards, anything on the Upper Trent Water Management Partnership Council?
The Upper Trent still hasn't met yet. It's the end of the month.
Okay. Anything on Muskoka Watershed?
Last week was the Muskoka watershed. Not a whole lot going on, although they are looking to organize some delegations to go to council, so we'll probably see something there soon. Like many organizations, I think they're looking for funding opportunities and volunteer, participation to keep them going.
Volunteer participation, maybe we can offer. Any questions? On the Community Policing Advisory Committee, I'm just somewhat frustrated with that. Because we really, we being the four mayors are really keen on getting that committee going, and there seems to be, I feel sorry for the acting detachment commander, seems to be having some challenges with doodle polls and getting a date set. And so I'm really hoping that there's a meeting soon, and I'm going to be sending a note out to everybody that's associated with that to kind of let's get things moving. Although there's no chair been established for that group yet because we haven't met yet. So I guess as the warden, I'm just going to try and take the lead and see that stepped up, because there's some issues that are coming up, and we need to have some discussions about that. Actually, I think as Deputy Mayor Dayu is actually the member who's on the Community Safety and Wellbeing Committee, that her name should be associated with that report. I mean, either one of us could probably bring up to date. I'm not sure if there has been a meeting that you've been able to attend.
There has not been since I put my name forward to attend as a participant rather than an alternate. So no, I have no update.
Okay, so the point was made that the alternate, should that person be interested, be advised of meetings and be able to attend and have input. It's, it's not, doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both And I understand you've got some interest in that, so look forward to hearing some more. And it's a big endeavor. There's so much involved. It was good to see the coordinator at the housing meeting yesterday. That's part of the issue, so sure she'll have information there to bring back to that committee. Seeing as how you're still on the hot seat, we'll ask if you've got anything to comment about the library board.
Sure. Actually, before we move on, if I may, on the community safety and well-being, Sue Tiffin did come to county recently to do a presentation on progress so far, and perhaps I can circulate her presentation to Algonquin Highlands Council. So far, it's looking very positive. People are really engaged. I guess in my mind, I forgot that we've had that update since the last time we sat at this table. So it is looking positive, but I will circulate the presentation that she presented to the county.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay,
Thanks.
great. And then what's my next? Library. We have an upcoming meeting, so I have nothing to report since last time. And that.
Okay, anything on the Muskoka River watershed communications?
Yeah, things are heating up. Freshet has begun.
Literally.
Yeah. And we will be meeting more often for the next few weeks because things are going to be moving faster now. But the key messages are, it looks like temperature and precipitation wise, we're at average, but the existing snowpack and conversion snowpack to water is at 193% over average. So if there is, so that's some pretty serious snow. And if there is another rain event such as yesterday's plus a heating event, then we will be advised about the possibility of flooding and where exactly that might occur. But they are excellent in sending almost daily updates. So I feel like we're in good hands in terms of how information is being relayed, but it's that existing snowpack that is creating the slight worry right now. Should we not have high levels of precipitation or really quick heat, probably not going to be an issue, but they will be monitoring that.
Well, and it looks to me like there's going to be a number of fairly warm days in the next week. So it'll thanks for the reports that you're sending out. I mean, it's really good information to get those updates, and so much appreciated. Okay, nothing under general business. Is there any notice of motions? Although it's not specifically a notice of motion, just to let all members of council know that I have asked that the discussion about the airport, the terms of reference for the airport committee take place at our next meeting. So just kind of all put your airport thinking caps on for that. We need to give staff just a little bit of an opportunity to prepare for that. So next meeting. Anything under correspondence? Deputy Mayor Dayu.
I apologize. Under the airport, would we be discussing the terms of reference for the updated study, or is it just the committee and current events?
Well, I think we need to have a discussion about, I mean, it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. But I think we need to have a discussion about look at the terms of reference.
Okay.
See, where we are with that and whether we think that the committee needs to be involved more or in more aspects. The initial terms of reference that the committee had was much broader than the existing terms of references because it's been honed right down to simply, this is it, events. That's all you get to do. And I'd like us to talk about that. And I think that as a result of our discussion, that will help to form, a little greater knowledge about where we want to go with the study that's to be done. And just as an added item, I did have a discussion with our economic development director, who's more than prepared to help us in any and all aspects of our work there. If Angie, wants to have another pair of eyes, look at the terms of reference for the study, if we want him to be a member of the airport committee or just come to meetings. He's definitely planning on coming to make a presentation to council, but he's very open to offering any and all assistance that he can in anything to do with airport development, growth, events. I mean, there's a tourism department as well that's willing to help. So lots of help there. With respect to the correspondence, I just would urge the members of council to look at the changes to the Environmental Assessment Act. Is that here or is that? Oh, yeah. EA modernization update, just to have a look at it, read it, see if there's anything that's of concern to you. For your information, I don't believe that we had anybody move anything forward. So if there's no other comment, could I have a mover and a seconder then to receive the correspondence summary? Councillor Richards, Councillor Shortreed.
By Councillor Richards, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved, council receives the April 6, 2023 correspondence listing for information.
All in favor? It's carried. No closed session. I'm under bylaws, so we've sent the clean and clear bylaw back for further amending, so we won't have that. Under the bylaw to delegate our authority up to the county for the shoreline preservation bylaw. There's a slight change to the document that we had presented on our agenda. It was delegating authority to the county, or was referring to lands within the county, and it should be Algonquin Highlands, not the county. It's within Algonquin Highlands. Item number 1. So could I have a mover and a second? Oh, you do a bylaw that covers them all, don't you? Yes. So you've amended that motion? Yes. Okay. Could I have a mover and a seconder then for the bylaws? Councillor Berry, Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Councillor Berry, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved the following bylaws be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with a corporate seal affixed. Bylaw 2023-26 as amended to delegate to the County of Haliburton all or part of the municipal's powers to pass a bylaw to prohibit or regulate the destruction or injuring of trees and native vegetation and to prohibit the dumping or placing of fill, removal of topsoil, or the alteration of grade of land on shoreline properties in the Township of Algonquin Highlands. In bylaw 2023-27 to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a contract extension agreement for site attendant and maintenance services for waste management sites and recycling centers between the corporation, the Township of Algonquin Highlands, and Watson General Contracting.
All in favor? Carried. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the confirmatory bylaw? Deputy Mayor Dayu. Councillor Shortreed.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Shortreed, be it resolved that bylaw 2023-28 being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council held during its April 6, 2023 meeting be received and read a first time, considered read a second and third time, and finally passed with a corporate seal affixed.
All in favor? That's carried. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Deputy Mayor Dayu, Councillor Richards.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Dayu, second by Councillor Richards, be it resolved the April 6, 2023 regular meeting is hereby adjourned at 11:54 a.m.
All in favor? That's carried.